Hello, love tubers. I hope y'all had a phenomenal weekend. I sure did. I don't think I'm done yet. But yeah. So, it's trying to come loose on me. I'm just gonna tuck it right on back under there. And we are on the last chapter, baby. If you've made it this far with me for my readings, or if you've listened to any of the readings at all and it has benefited you, awesome. I thank you. I hope you subscribed, and I hope you definitely smashed the like button on all the videos that you listened to or that you got something from. Okay? We're going to get started with the last chapter. Chapter 10. Woo, I'm excited. I have learned a lot by reading this book. It has been quite an eye-opener. And I have started to put some practices into place. And if you've been listening, I hope if you weren't doing some of the practices that you have started to put some practices in place as well. Okay. So what we've covered so far up until chapter 10 is what is money, the myths about money, the science of spending, the science of debt, the science of generating income, the science of creating wealth, the science of multiplying wealth, the science of wealth protection, the science of money and happiness. We are now going to talk about the science of economic rules for a vibrant national economy. So the whole purpose of this book was to take the mystery out of money so that it doesn't seem so foreign in some instances, and so that we can incorporate, at least that's what I was reading it for, so that we could incorporate better practices going forward and be accountable for our actions while keeping track of spending and saving. All right. The science of economic rules for a vibrant national economy. All right. Before we conclude, let's elevate our viewpoint from the ground level of our own lives to the 50,000-foot level and see how what we have learned relates to our national and increasingly global economy as a whole. Welcome, Love Tubers, if you're just joining in. It's no secret that we face some difficult financial challenges in the United States. That is definitely not a secret. Especially when you go to the library and you see all the homeless people. Both now and in the near future, Brian believes that it is crucial, even our duty as a responsible citizen, to know what it takes to make our economy thrive for decades to come. Then Brian will conclude with a review of what you've learned and how to make your personal economy one that thrives for years and years. We're starting with Dan asking the questions. Dan. Brian, let's begin by having you discuss why you believe that understanding the basic rules of economics, not just on a personal level, but on a national level, is vitally important for every productive citizen in this nation. Brian, I was confused about economics when I was growing up. And if you're confused, then you're easily manipulated and moved by political rhetoric and demagoguery. In fact, most of the modern politics depends upon the economic ignorance of the population. Wow. There's a great story. There was a king, and he became very wealthy. He decided that he would collect all the wisdom of the world. That would be his legacy to the world. So he sent out his wise men all over the world with unlimited budgets to bring back the collective wisdom of mankind. And they came back with 100,000 books. That's the key right there. Y'all need to be reading if you're not. And by this time, he's about 50 or 55 years old. That's too many books, he said. You got to consolidate it down. The wise men got together and consolidated and finally came up with 1,000 books. But by this time, he was 60 years old. He said, I can never read 1,000 books. So you've got to consolidate them down. So they went away and worked for another 10 years. And they condensed the knowledge down to 100 books. Ooh, this is giving me ideas. 100 books. Now he was in his 70s and he was creaking. He said, it's still too much. My goodness gracious, 100 books? Can you possibly summarize it even better? So they went away. And about 5 years later, they came back to meet with the king. That's a lot of time. The leader of the wise men had one little piece of paper in his hand. He said, we've been able to summarize all the wisdom of all the ages into one piece of paper. And here it is. He opened it up and he said, there ain't no free lunch. This is the great principle of economics. There ain't no free lunch. In the Western world today, we have what I call Santa Claus economics. Something for nothing economics. Use the public purse to buy themselves into office. Politicians use the public purse to buy themselves into office, and then they raise taxes to use the public purse. He called it the public purse, Lord. To keep themselves in office. All of politics today is log rolling. You vote for my expenditure and my taxation, then I'll vote for yours. One hand scratches the other person's back, and so on. All politicians get into office by promising to give free money to other people. Santa Claus. Just watch. Every election, somebody is running as Santa Claus. Every so often, an adult stands up and says, where's the money going to come from? They boo this person down. The government will pay. It's not their money, folks. They have no money, except the money that they extract from the private sector. Here's a very good picture. Imagine a swimming pool. A government employee takes a bucket and dips it in one end of the pool and runs around to the other end of the pool and pours it back in. That is exactly what the governments do. They take money out of one end from one person or group in one particular way, and then they go and they pour it back in, but there's no net gain in the economy. But here's the worst thing. Because government servants are sloppy, they spill 80% of the water, so that the amount of the water that actually gets poured back into substantially less than they picked up in the first place. So as government expenditures go up, government or national wealth goes down. Unemployment goes up as government expenditures go up. Wages flatten out as government expenditures go up because government is basically a dead weight on the society. Government produces nothing of value that people want because if people wanted it, the private sector would produce it. The mayor of Indianapolis had a way of transforming, let's see where I'm at. The mayor of Indianapolis had a way of transforming what was basically a debt-ridden economy. This book was written, I think, like 4 years ago. I gotta go check and see who the mayor was. He called it the Yellow Pages test. He said, if there is any function that the government performs for which there are 3 or more companies that perform it in the private sector, it's going to be farmed out. The public sector unions went hysterical because they are paid extremely well. They are bankrupting virtually every city, state, and country and national government in the country with trillions of dollars unfunded liabilities. They went hysterical, but he stuck to it. So if you needed trash hauling, if you needed fire hydrant maintenance, if you needed gardening for municipal function parks and things like that, if there was a company that did it, he put it out to bid. Surprisingly, the government unions came back. They had to bid in competition with the private sector, and their prices went down. The government unions began to lay off their own lazy people and began to do the jobs and do them well and do them at competitive pricing or prices. Many years ago, Henry Hazlitt is spelled Hazlitt, an economist, wrote a treatise called Economics in One Lesson, based on Frederick Bastiat's, Bastiat', essay, What is Seen and What Is Not. Read that. He said, what you see is the result of government expenditure. Governments hire employees. What do you see is that for every person in that government hires, 2 people must lose jobs in the private sector. Okay. You see, the government has created all of these new jobs, but you don't see the jobs that disappeared because business people either laid people off or didn't start businesses in the first place because their taxes were too high. These are all standard economic principles. Didn't learn that in school. I remember a politician who was confronted with this question. Do you know anything about basic economics? You can't take out what you didn't put in, which explains why we are deficient. You can't consume what you don't produce. There ain't no free lunch, he said. I know nothing about economics, and I don't want to know anything about economics because if I did, it would change the way I voted. This is a disease that we have throughout the Western world. We are seeing that Japan has tipped into recession, one of the most potential prosperous economies. It was number 3 worldwide 2 decades ago, but then they brought in all of these government taxation, regulation, and expenditure programs and strangled what was the 3rd most prosperous country in the world. Oh, wow. And this is happening now in France. France is dying. I'm sorry, France. In the US today, more companies are dying than are being formed for the first time in American history. It used to be that more and more new companies were formed and a certain number would die through attrition each year. Today is reversed. Actually, our entrepreneurial and corporate sectors are dying out. Companies today are not expanding. They're leaving their money overseas, or they're leaving their money in the bank. Apple has $200 billion. They sit on it because it's not safe to invest it because the government will take it away from you with regulations, taxes, new laws. So basically, they have a whole team of lawyers and accountants protecting their money from the government. People are not willing to take risk. That's our problem in economics today. The Santa Claus politicians are offering something for nothing. Money that people have not earned and do not deserve. And they're buying votes with it. And every time they buy a vote, The next decision they have to up the ante and offer even more of the public, which is very few, will just switch its votes to someone else who offers them more. This is a whole sermon right there in that paragraph. Okay. Dan. Right now, our national debt is at an unprecedented and unsustainable levels. Discuss how this debt bomb is taking the disease of something for nothing to a national level. Talk about this challenge that we face, how it occurred, what can be done to fix it, and what can we do as citizens to face this. Ooh, this is yummy. One, so two. So he's answering 4 questions. Okay. The debt is money that is borrowed. It's borrowed from the public in the form of government bonds. But ultimately, it has to be paid back. The people who know nothing about economics say, we owe it to ourselves, so we don't really owe it. Yes, we do. Today, we have 0 interest rates. If our interest rates were running at 4% or 5% on a government debt of $18 trillion, 4% or 5% would work out to be $1 trillion a year in interest. The country would go bankrupt. That's why they're fighting desperately to keep interest rates at close to 0 as possible until they get out of office. You notice that for people who work in the private sector and have pensions, the pensions are tied to the stock market. Oh, I'm getting a lesson. People who work in the government have pensions as well, but the pensions are not tied to anything. They're guaranteed unconditionally for life, and they are altered on the basis of inflation. So if the economy goes to hell in a handbasket, the politicians will end up with the golden parachutes, fabulous pension benefits, and medical benefits that will be adjusted upward. So that they'll always be earning more money than when they left office. A politician who serves 2 terms in Washington will retire, I believe, with more than $1 million in pension benefits. Did y'all know that? My goodness. Plus, they'll have a Cadillac medical plan for life. Where's the money going to come from? They don't want to talk about it. That's a lot of money. There's an expression from Charles de Gaulle when he was talking about after he left office that France would have chaos. He said, après moi le déluge, which means after me, the deluge flood. That's it. It'll all be over. 50 years after I left office, all these chickens will come home to roost. All the bills will be payable, but I'll be gone. I'll be retired. I'll be sitting with my own private retirement plan with all my bills paid off with fabulous medical benefits, and the economy can go down the drain, but it won't affect my income because my income is completely separate from any other pension program. My income is guaranteed for as long as I live. Hello, Adam Clayton. I'm fine, darling. I hope you are as well, baby. Happy Monday. We're finishing up the science of money, okay? Let me know if you got any questions, darling. So what we do have a lot of challenges, but here's what's worse. According to Business Week, the amount of unfunded liabilities, the amount that we owe not just in national debt, so liabilities, 19.2 trillion when this book was written, but in Social Security, Medicare, pensions, everything else that is unfunded, that means it's on the books, it has to be paid each year. It's closer to 107 trillion. Whew. Medicare, pensions, everything else. $107 trillion is about 6 times what this country earns in a year. And this means it can never, ever be paid off. We are the most affluent country in history. And we owe so much debt, it's crushing. Estonia has very little debt. Many countries have no debt at all, and we have more debt than all the other countries in the world put together. The only solution they think of is increase the debt limit. Borrow more money that will never be paid back. I don't know who they got a contract signed with, but if they pull that contract for any reason for what they owe, we in trouble. Dan, there's an old saying, if I owe $3,000, I have a problem. If I owe $3 million, the bank has a problem. The meaning behind this is, if I don't pay that money back, the bank somehow has to make it up. So they're going to do everything they can, especially if I have a massive loan with that bank, to make sure that I'm credit worthy and that I can pay it back. And so I wonder, is there any escape hatch in the scenario of the United States getting out from under this debt bubble, whereby other nations such as China would simply forgive the debt because of their reliance on us, particularly our consumers? Or is it bankruptcy going to be our only way out of this situation? Brian. They say because the US dollar is the reserve currency, we can continue to print money and other people will hold it. The only thing we have going for us now is that almost every other country is politically more unstable. That's why more and more money comes to the US, because it's safer here. I don't know about that. It's protected by law, so I think they will continue to punt it for a long time. They will pay it down, but what's coming down the bend are higher interest rates. It's going to wipe out the entire defense budget, take out all health, education, and welfare, eliminate Medicaid, unless they raise the taxes by hundreds of billions and maybe even another $1 trillion, and they have no choice. If the interest rates go up, you have to pay 5% interest on this 18 trillion worth of deficit. But there are all those other deficits that have to be paid, Medicare and Social Security. They're all going broke. There's no trust fund. There's no saving. There are completely unfunded liabilities. There's not a penny put aside for any of this, more than 100 trillion worth of debt. We owe more than all the countries in the world put together, only because we can print dollars. Dan. It's another reason why people need to listen and to apply all the lessons you are teaching. The generations coming up could face a reduced standard of living. And they will perhaps have to provide for themselves even more than previous generations. Discuss the book Democracy in America by Alexis D. Tocqueville. The lessons it taught about why America was so successful in the early days and how it points to areas where we may have fallen short in more recent years. Brian. The primary message that I recall from Alexis D. Tocqueville who published his book in 1835, is that America was made up of individualists, people who accepted individual responsibility for their own work and for the results of their production. It was also made up of communitarians, and that people cooperated together with barn raisings, bringing in crops, and so on. He said that this was the most remarkable thing. There is no elite in America. There is no landed aristocracy. America was set up so that average people could come here and start with nothing. By hard work and dint of entrepreneurial activity could create a wonderful life for themselves. De Tocqueville saw all this. He saw that the government at the time was extremely small, whereas the governments in Europe were enormous, overwhelmingly oppressive. It led to revolutions and mass murders. There were revolutions in France, Germany, and Italy. There were eventually revolutions in Russia where the working class rose up because of the taxes and oppression. We never had that in the U.S. The U.S. was set up as an anti-aristocratic. Nobody was better because they came from a wealthy family. Nobody was better because they came from, one of the examples I like to use is Bill Gates. I just read on him the other week. The richest man in America, as of this month, was worth $79 billion. Imagine that Bill Gates came up to you and said, "I'm Bill Gates, and I'm the richest man in America. Here, kiss my ring." Imagine if he said that to an immigrant, a poor person, a street person, an average person, a dishwasher. There's nobody in America who would kiss the ring of a person just because he's the richest man in the world. America would consider that to be ridiculous. We just don't do that. But we're losing this sense of individuality and independence. And this is the great challenge. More and more people are becoming dependent upon the government and saying, why doesn't the government do this? I'll tell you a quick story. Alabama is very famous for having boars. These boars were vicious creatures. They were out in the woods and nobody went out there because the boars would kill dogs and they'd kill hunters. One day, the farmer drives into this area and stops at a little town. He said, "I want to catch me some of them boars." They said, "No, you don't. Just don't go near the boars. If we go hunting with boars, we have dogs and we have rifles because they are so dangerous." He said, "Just tell me where they are and leave it to me." So they said, "You'll find them down there at the south end of the swamp." So he goes out and he's gone for a few days. When he comes back, he's there with a big pickup loaded with boars. They're all alive and they're all oinking and jammed into this pickup shoulder to shoulder. He stops to get some gas. He asks, "How did you get them?" Nobody could capture even one of those boars. They're the most vicious animals in the southern United States. He said, "It was real easy. I took some cornmeal and I just put it on the ground and went away. The boys came out and sniffed around and finally ate the meal, and then I came back and I did it again. I did it again the second day and they came out. Then I started to build a little corral about 10 feet away, started to put some trees and some sticks down there. They came in and ate the meal and went away." I just kept building up this corral, and after a few days, they were coming there and lining up, getting ready for their free food. And they came up and they ate the food, then they closed the back of the corral, and the only place the boys would go was out the other end. And the other end was the ramp to the truck. He put a trail of cornmeal right up into the back of the pickup. The boys walked up and got into the back. They jammed in all the way to the end and ate the meal. He closed the back of the pickup truck and drove away. He said, "It's easy. You make people dependent for any period of time and they'll lose all sense of individuality, all sense of independence, all sense of danger. They become meek and mild and easily controlled." This has been the policy of governments throughout the world. To make people meek and controlled by giving them free things until finally they become too weak to resist. I'm so glad he's covering this. That's what we're doing, not only here but throughout the world. Most government policies are designed to make people completely dependent on the government, so they will vote for the government, which promises to keep the gravy train coming. Dan. Brian, in a non-partition way, can we discuss some specifics of science of economics and how each area makes a difference in how effectively an economy works? Here are some topics for our discussion: tax policy, minimum wage laws, regulation, size of government, such as federal versus state, and any other areas that you feel are important to a proper understanding of basic economics. Brian, the bottom line is that everything government does, it makes worse, because everything that goes through government is political. That means it is controlled by a political agenda. And the political agenda is always to enrich your friends and punish your enemies. That's why every single political contribution is a quid pro quo. I contribute my money, but I expect a big payoff from the politicians if they get into office. You're gambling, putting your money on that horse. If that horse wins, the horse is going to pay you off. It's going to give you a good ride. There is an organization in Washington that analyzes the amount of campaign contributions versus the amount of government benefits the company gets in the next 4 years. Today, it's running 72-1. There was a solar panel company that went bankrupt. The founder of the company gave $100,000 to Obama in the first election. He got $526 million back from the government in the next 2 years, even though in the government they said this is a complete waste of time. This company has no products, it has no ability to pay the money back. That's the biggest payoff that I know of. The money disappeared. To this day. Nobody has asked where it went. Wow. They were told from the White House, just give them the money, because they were trying to send a signal to other donors. It worked because they raised $800 million in the next election. Everybody knew the big payoffs. What we know is that a government grows, the private sector declines. The private sector produces products and services that people want and need or willing to pay for, products and services that are considered to be actual wealth. For example, cars, clothes, homes, furniture, cell phones. This is what people consider to be wealth because it enhances their standard of living. Government expenditures on hundreds of thousands and millions of employees who sit around most of the day do not create wealth. Some say the GNP grows because when we hire more government servants. No, because you have to kill 2 jobs in the private sector to hire one person to work for the government. And then these people sit around most of the time. Hard work and government employee never appear in the same sentence. They would laugh at you. The fact is that as government grows, the hope and possibilities for the people decline. So they have found over and over again that the only way to increase real genuine prosperity and opportunity is decrease the size of the government, decrease regulations, decrease taxes, let the people go, leave the people to be free, get out of their way. Most business people in America says, just get out of the way. We don't want any government help. We don't want any politics. We don't want anything. Just leave us alone and let us build and operate our businesses. You'll find that the economies around the world that are booming are the ones that have the least regulation and the lowest rates. The ones that are dying are the ones that have the most regulations and highest taxes, and this is true right across the spectrum. America used to be the freest nation in the world. It's now number 19. It is below Botswana. In his book, Trust, the Social Values and the Creation of Prosperity, Francis, I'm going to have to spell this one, Fukuyama, Fukuyama, the historian, showed that the economics that had the highest level of trust were also the most prosperous. The economics that had the lowest level of trust were the most impoverished. They had done indices on ease of doing business as well. The economics where it's the easiest to start a business are the most prosperous. Those where it's most difficult to do business are the least prosperous. Most difficult and easiest. Transparency International also says that the countries that have the most corruption are the least prosperous. Some of y'all catch that in a minute. Okay. For several decades after World War II, the U.S. led all these indices. Now the U.S. is running number 19. It's even running number 18 or 19 in terms of educational attainment. We spend more per student than any other country in the world, and we have the worst outcomes. Ooh. So until you have leadership that can stand up and say this is not good, we have to reverse it. We've got to start making it easier for people to work and start businesses. We've got to make it easier for people to do businesses and to trade nationally and internationally. Until we do that, there's no government policy that can possibly help. There you have it. It's a truth sermon. Damn. There's been a great deal of discussion recently about a top 1% versus the 99%. We learned actually it's 97 versus 3%. Many people believe that capitalism is at a cancerous stage where the rich keep getting richer and everyone else will continue to stay the same or get poor. Statistics that show flat wages for the vast majority of the country with huge increases in wealth for the very top, particularly the top 0.1%, suggest these concerns may be valid. Discuss your feelings about this controversy. Is it a valid concern? Do you think capitalism can still work effectively at this stage in our economy? As I said before, capitalism is actually savingsism. If you could imagine a primitive farmer who plants a seed and brings it in the harvest, what does he do with the crop? He puts seed aside for planting the next year, and that seed is taken away from the amount of food that he and his family can consume. In other words, he deprives himself and others. He saves his money, he sacrifices, he practices delayed gratification throughout all of human history. These have been the qualities of success. In the same way, If you work hard and you earn money and you take some of that money and save it, and then you invest that money carefully in something like an income producing piece of real estate or a stock or bond or mutual fund or something that generates revenue, then what you are doing is you are becoming a capitalist, which means a savingsist. The word capitalist came from Karl Marx, Marx, who did not understand cause and effect. He saw wealthy people, but wealthy people save their money and they reinvest it. There's an enormous amount of risk and very high levels of failure, and sometimes there are long periods of time before there's a return. If you build a factory, the factory may cost you 3 to 5 years to build and 3 to 5 years to make a profit. So a person has to be willing to invest for a 10-year period before it starts to make money. And then the Pikettys and the Stiglitzes and the socialists go around and say, look at this wealthy son of a gun making all this money from manufacturing these products, marking up the products 2, 3, 4, 5 times and ripping off the poor consumer. What about the 10 years that the person invested to build the factory or the business in the first place? A small business takes 7 years to reach profitability. This day it reaches profitability, the tax people are in, and they want 50% of your profits because they have no understanding of cause and effect. The tax people. So the problem we have in America with inequality is that people don't save their money. They're taught to spend their money, to spend it on fun, to buy big televisions, go to Las Vegas. Every state now has legalized gambling. So if you can't go to Las Vegas, you can gamble right where you are. The fact is that if you save money and invest it carefully, eventually you become a capitalist. You're a savingsist. Where there are no savings, there are no capital accumulation, then there's no future for the nation. But savings means you have to deprive yourself of the joy of consumption today in order to enjoy a higher level of consumption sometime in the future. Savings means putting off into the future the consumption that you would enjoy today. I mean, that sounds pretty simple. Yeah. It is only the willingness of people to do that makes a civilized society possible. Countries where there's no security or safety for savings, corrupt countries, dishonest countries, are countries where people don't save. The reason the U.S. is in such a safe place to invest is that money is carefully protected by law. You cannot steal money without going to jail, unless you're a politician. Government, unless you do it legally. That's not in this book, but okay. We got some folks need to be locked up. Okay. In other places, you can steal with both hands and live in a palace on the hill. You can buy off all the politicians and judges in the courts, which is what is causing these countries to be in such terrible shape because nobody wants their money. The fact is, you cannot consume what you don't produce. The job of the government is to create an environment where the natural, spontaneous entrepreneur instincts of individuals lead to the development of new products and services and businesses. And they'll hire people and create jobs and opportunities. They'll pay more taxes, which pays for all school and hospital and university and roads and everything else. That's basic economics, and we are living in cloud cuckoo land. We're thinking that it's possible for government to continue to strengthen the private sector and that it's not going to have a long-term effect. And they all expect to be out of office and living on fat pensions before the chickens come home to roost. With regard to income inequality, everybody is born. Oh, wow. Well, let's just get to the nitty gritty, why don't we? Everyone is born unequal. And here's the great problem. I've studied and written about this extensively. Most people are unequal by choice. They're unequal in that they have stopped upgrading their knowledge and skills decades ago. They have bad influences or no influences. They did poorly in school. For whatever reason, they came out illiterate. 50% or more of high school students in America graduate illiterate, oh my gosh, and unable to fill out an application form to work at McDonald's. I bet you it's higher now. 50 to 60% of university students who are being admitted have to take remedial courses on English and math during the summer in order to be able to take basic 101 level courses in the fall. These people have no skills. They can't read. They can't operate computers. They don't understand science or mathematics or engineering. They have no knowledge of business or management or marketing. They have no way to create value. They have no earning ability. And as a result, their incomes are lower. As Gary Becker of the University of Chicago said, we don't have an income gap. We have a skills gap. The people in the bottom 80% have not improved their skills for decades. They came out, worked for 1 year, and never read a book. The people in the top 20% are always upgrading their skills and increasing the value, so the inequality is self-inflicted. Each person decides to be equal or unequal in a good or bad way by whether or not they work on themselves and increase their ability to contribute value to their fellow man. When a person says, I've been working at McDonald's for 10 years, I'm 35 years old, I'm getting $8 an hour, and I've got 7 children with no husband at home, then whose fault is that? Who made all of those lifestyle choices that gets a person to that situation? At a certain point, somebody has to say to that individual, that individuals are largely responsible for their own lives. As soon as you take away the idea of responsibility, the society falls apart. Actually, the society only stays together because so many people do accept high levels of responsibility and don't blame their problems on people. Just gonna highlight that whole conversation. Okay. Dan, another economic concern is the effect of automation, not just now, but in the future, and how it may flatten wages and impact jobs. What does this portend for the future of employment in America? Do you think more people should consider going to the entrepreneur route as a result? Oh, I want to hear this. Brian, there have been waves of automation since 1770. Every single time that there was a wave of automation, new factories, spinning wheels, there was a huge outcry. This is going to destroy jobs and leave people in the streets. Oh, this sounds like AI. In every, in every single case was an automation. What an automation does is systematize simple, boring jobs, and it frees people up to do higher order work that is more enjoyable and more challenging. Therefore, so that's the answer right there. Each time automation comes in, it actually creates more jobs. I like Brian. When the automobile came out, the practice was to manufacture cars using teams. So an automobile plant may have had 20 or 30 teams, and each would be working on a car. When industry came up with a production line, automation and scientific management, they were able to hire hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of car factories grew up to employ tens of thousands and millions of people at higher standards of living with better wages, better health care. For the first time in history, a man could afford to work, his whole family could stay at home up until the time the whole family had to work. The kids begging, the mothers working in the fields, the fathers working at a crummy job. But with automation, suddenly one man could provide for his whole family and his kids could go to school and his wife could stay home. Come on, automation. The challenge is that with automation, you have to upgrade your skills and you have to continue upgrading your skills all your life. Every single time a job automated, it frees people up to do higher level work, and that is one of the blessings. If it wasn't for automation, we'd all still be living on the farm. Whew, it made them evolve. Do you know that at the turn of the 20th century, 50% of Americans lived on the farm, feeding the other 50%. Today, less than 1% of Americans live on the farm, and they feed 330 million people, and they export shiploads of surplus food all over the world to rich and poor countries because of automation. So automation is a great thing, but it requires that you upgrade your skills. Brian, as we are coming to an end, I thought it would be good if you could give us a review, call it a mini course, on the economic laws and principles that make for a vibrant national economy. Can you share this with us, Brian? Yes. I culled these economic laws from my years and years of research. In mathematics, there are certain principles that, once understood, enable the mathematician to solve complex problems that would be impossible for the average person. In mechanics, there are certain proven principles that enable a skilled craftsman to repair an automobile or an airplane using certain methods, processes, and tools that would be difficult for an untrained average person. In economics, there are certain laws that explains all of human behavior and which are essential for the entrepreneur to understand. The first is the law of scarcity. It's the fundamental law of economics. It says economics goods have value because the supply of them available is less than the amount that is deserved. In other words, there are never enough houses. There are never enough cars. There are never enough diamond rings or beautiful watches or extra clothes. Scarcity is what gives value to everything. This idea that there should be a surplus, that everybody should be able to have all they want of some good guaranteed by the government, is nonsense. There will always be scarcity. In terms of economics, you must continually choose among various options because you cannot have everything you want. Only little children stomp their feet and scream and have tantrums saying, I want this and I want that. The fact is that you always have to choose because your ability to purchase things is always limited. And because goods are scarce, trade-offs are always necessary. This is how the great law of economics that governs society, you cannot give anything to everyone at all times under all conditions. There just isn't enough. The second law is the law of supply and demand. That says that the price of a good or service is in direct proportion to the available supply relative to demand at the point of acquisition. The wage, for example, or a fast food worker, the price of the fast food worker, which is basically a commodity, is determined by how many people are willing to work at fast food places for minimum wage. The fact is that because people have no other skills, they are willing to work by the millions at those places. Wow. If somebody says, I won't work for less than $15 an hour, they will be replaced in about 5 minutes by a whole list of people lined up at the job at that place for $8 or $7.75 an hour because of supply and demand. There's no objective price. It's always based on how much people want something and how much they are willing to pay. The law of supply and demand determines all prices, all profits, all wages, all growth, decline, costs, losses, and the success or failure of every business. What's the 411? Okay. And the same with any company that exports, is always supply and demand. Successful entrepreneurs work continually to increase the demand for what they are selling so that they can increase the price they charge. This is what all of the advertising, marketing, and promotion is aimed at: increasing the demand. Another principle is that entrepreneurs continually seek to provide their products and services better, cheaper, faster, or more conveniently so they can increase the demand for them. That's the basic law. That's law. Okay. The law of scarcity. Everything is scarce. The law of supply and demand. Price is determined by how much people want it. As we said before, the number one reason companies go broke is that nobody wants the product at that price. The law of substitution in economics says certain goods and services can be substituted for each other when the supply and demand ratio for them changes. I'll give you an example. When beef becomes too expensive, people substitute and buy chicken. When gasoline prices become too high, companies automate and replace workers with machines. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. People buy smaller cars. I'll read it again. When gasoline prices become too high, people buy smaller cars. When labor prices become too high, companies automate and replace workers with machines. Customers always have three choices. It's always a cost-benefit relationship. If I can pay for this machine And by saving these wages, I can earn more in the long run. That's a good investment. Customers always have three choices in the marketplace. They can buy the product or service offered, or they can buy something from or they can buy from some other company, your competitor, or they can refrain from buying anything at all. Whenever you go into the marketplace, I have shirts and stuff for sale, just in case if you didn't know. Shirts, bathroom cups, you name it. Um, Especially on my spring page, which is on my LinkedIn, or you can check out my Amazon merch page too. That's my marketing plug. Whenever you go into the marketplace, your company always has those three choices: buy from you, buy from the competitor, or not buy anything at all. This is the law of substitution. The law of connectivity is another great economic law. So this is the third chapter he's talked about these laws in. It says various products and services are connected to each other in either a positive or negative way and directly or inversely affect the price of each other. For example, when the price of an item goes up, it often causes the price of something connected to it to go up as well. Food prices increase. Food price increases lead to restaurant price increases. That's why they're saying today in San Diego that you can't get a prime rib at the best restaurants because beef prices have gone up, because corn prices have gone up. Prime rib prices have gone up, and it's too expensive to offer on the menu anymore. So why can't you get prime rib? It's because of the connectivity of all these prices. When the price of an item goes up, it causes the demand for something else to go down. When the restaurant prices go up, the number of people going to the restaurants go down. Or you may have a reverse connectivity. The number of people going to the fast food restaurants may increase if the prices in expensive restaurants go up. Reverse connectivity. Everything is interwoven with everything else, so price connectivity can affect the cost of other products. If people stop going to restaurant and the restaurant can end up buying fewer food products from other suppliers, so it can have a reverse domino effect. If a business stops selling more of its product, it cuts back on the raw material, it cuts back on labor, again, connectivity. There's a story about a guy who just commissioned a painting from an artist because his business is doing well. He goes into a restaurant, he sits there. There's a poster on the wall. It's from a newspaper that says, "Hard times are coming. The economy is about to drop. We're going to have a recession, depression, and unemployment." He's looking at that and he thinks, geez, I haven't even thought about that. Here, I paid all this money for this painting. So he goes to the phone, he calls up and he cancels the commission. The artist had just called someone to come and paint her house because she thought she had the money for that. She had the money for that. Now she cancels the job. Then the house painter calls the car dealer because he has just gotten this painting job and was going to get a new car. It goes like this all the way, all through economy. Hello, darling. Thanks for tuning in. Well, the first guy goes back into the restaurant a couple of days later and he looks at the poster. He looks a little closer and he finds the poster was put up and framed 22 years before. The point is that the wrong piece of information can lead to a connectivity like this, which has a cascading negative effect. That's why whenever they pronounce the unemployment is up, the stock market drops, people sell their shares, they run for cover, they say unemployment isn't that bad, and the shares all rush up again. The whole stock market is affected by news. The next law is called the law of marginality. It says that all economic decisions and therefore all prices and costs are determined by the last purchase decision made. This is an important thing to understand. The amount that the last consumer will pay for the last item available determines the price of the whole supply. Let's say you sell donuts. Ooh, it got me thinking along those donuts. Ooh, all right. And the hungriest person who wants donuts more than anything will pay $1 a piece for them because he wants them so badly. But you can't sell your donuts at $1 a piece because there'd only be a few people that would pay that amount. You have to sell your donuts at a much lower price so that more and more people can come into the market. And you keep charging it at a price that is low enough, but on which you still make a profit so that you can sell more and more. Let's say you get the price down to 50 cents a donut or 25 cents a donut, then everybody can have a donut as long as you're making a profit at the last available sale. The principle of marginality says it's not that one highly motivated customer will pay. It's what the last discriminating, careful, cautious customer will pay that sets the price for everything that you offer. Ooh, child. This was a lesson. The key, this was the key. As long as you're making a profit at the last available sale, it's not that what one highly motivated customer will pay. It's what the last discriminating, careful, cautious customer will pay that sets the price for everything that you have, that you offer. It's always the last customer who can buy that product or buy it somewhere else that sets the price. If I can get it somewhere else at 25 cents and you're charging 26 cents, which lowers the entire, if you've got everybody selling apples and they're different kind of apples, and there's a huge supply of them, that means everybody, if you had high standard apples at first and you were the only one in the market, you've got to now lower your prices because now everybody's got apples. I'll go to the other place because it's 1 cent cheaper. So 25 cents, 26 cents. So the market clearing price is the price at which all customers will satisfy their needs and all sellers will sell their products and services. If you go to a public market, you'll find that people bring their produce to sell. Their goal is to have an empty stand at the end of the day so that the last customer buys the last product from the last stand and everybody goes home. Everything's sold. That is the market clearing price. What you do is you price at the market clearing price for the first customer of the day so that by the end of the day, everything has been sold. This principle of marginality is essential to all pricing. Essential. The next law is called the law of decreasing returns, which it is important. Both personally and in business, it says the returns rewards or profits from some economic activities decrease over time. It says you can't often earn high profits from the first products or services you sell. The cost of You can often earn high profits from the first products or services you sell. The cost of producing those products or services, however, can increase, and later you could earn fewer profits or the product or service because your costs have been much more higher. There are many activities that you engage in that have a decreasing value. The more of them you do, the less value that they have to your customers. Then there is the law of increasing returns. The profitability of a product, service, or activity can increase as you produce or offer more of it. This, by the way, is the reason for the success of mass manufacturers. In the retail sector, Walmart, for example, increases their returns because they buy more and more products, hundreds of thousands, millions, and spread them over 11,000 stores. They get the prices so low they become the first choice source of all these products for millions and millions of customers every day. Knowledge is the real source of competitive advantage today. Knowledge. As you produce a knowledge-based product, you become more efficient with every additional unit. It therefore costs you less to produce each unit, increasing the profits you earn on each unit you sell. I'll give you an example of increasing returns.
All patrons are invited to the community room at 6:30 to meet Madam C.J. Walker and Ida B. Wells.
Okay. I do a wonderful seminar called 21st Century Selling. For me to produce that seminar, it took hundreds of hours of research and years of experience on the street. Once I gave the seminar and polished it using feedback, I now have a seminar that is one of the best-selling seminars on selling in the world. I've given that seminar over 300 times all the world and charged my fees over 300 times all over the world and charge my fees, which are quite high. If someone says, we need a sales seminar, I can start in 5 minutes because I've paid an enormous price to develop that intellectual product. Once it's produced, it can be reproduced at a very low price. So knowledge-based products that have a benefit of increasing returns, the more of them you sell, the more profitable they are. The next law, and this is really important to our discussion about international and national economics, is called the law of secondary consequences. It says that every action has both primary and secondary consequences. For everything you do, something else happens as a result. And for many things that you fail to do, there's a consequence as well. According to the economic Bastiat and Hazlitt and others, the primary consequence is always positive. A person says, I'm going to drop out of school and get a job and a car and have girls. The primary consequence is positive. He's cool. He's got a car. He's got a girlfriend. What are the secondary consequences? Lack of education, a low-level job, high levels of unemployment throughout his life, and no skills in automation. Eventually, he's poor. This is one of the great problems in our world today. An enormous number of people engage in activities that have serious secondary consequences. Economist Milton Friedman said that the ability to accurately consider what's likely to happen as a secondary consequence is the key to excellent thinking. It's not the primary consequence, which is always something adventurous. You eat a box of donuts. I've seen people eat a box of Krispy Kreme donuts. The primary result is the deliciousness of donuts, but the secondary result is that you're going to feel sluggish. You're not going to sleep very well. If you keep doing this over time, you're going to get overweight. You're going to have a big gut. You're going to buy clothes that are larger and so on. So the secondary consequences of what seem to be a nice thing to do can be tremendous or they can be awful. The next law is called the law of unintended consequences. I need to know all of these by heart. The ultimate consequence of many actions are far worse than if nothing had been done at all. This explains almost all government policies. Sometimes an action taken to generate profits actually generates losses. This is great danger in business. We can go all in on an investment and end up being broke or losing all our money and being far worse off than if we hadn't made the investment at all. Unintended consequences always occur when an action depends for its success on violating the principles of expediency, which I'll explain in a couple of minutes. The something for nothing Santa Claus mentality. The next law, the law of choice, says that every human action entails a choice among alternatives, and the choice is always based on the dominant values of the individual at that moment. Your true values are always expressed in your actions. You can always tell what a person thinks, believes, and values by looking at what they do, not at what they say, wish, or hope. If you have two types of donuts on the table, you're always going to choose the donut that you want more. If you have two people to marry, you'll choose the one you value the most. It's the same when you have two cars to buy, two jobs to take, two courses to enroll in. By your actions, you always prove what is most valuable and important to you. This was a shocker to me because it finally explained why people would say one thing and do something else. And then they would explain it away. Everybody does it, or it doesn't matter. They would say this, and you think, wait a minute, now what you do is a true expression of who you fundamentally are. So every action you take or decline to take implies a choice and statement about your values and belief. Once I understood that, I understood the world. Values. Beliefs. The next law is the law of excluded alternative, which says whatever you choose to do, you're simultaneously excluding all other choices at that moment. Every choice implies a rejection of all other choices, at least for the moment, especially in the marketplace. When you have a choice, you have a scarcity and limited supply. When you have a choice, you always choose what is most important to you. In choosing, you reject all other possible choices. This is some good stuff right here. When you marry one person, you reject all other people that you could marry in the whole world, or at least you had better. And every choice that you make tells yourself and others what you truly believe and value. The last law, and this is the basis of entire Austrian school, is the law of subjective value. The value of anything is subjective. It is determined by what someone is willing to pay for it, and this explains inequality and why people's incomes are flat and so on. You cannot tell anybody what your job is worth. It's worth what somebody else is willing to pay you freely in a free economy when they can choose someone else, and this is a shock. All attempts to get above market rates must use government force, legislation, punishment, fines, and everything else. We had a major meltdown in 2008 to 2009. It was caused because the federal government passed laws that made it mandatory for the banks to lend people who had no credit because the politicians hoped that these people would then vote for them in the next election. It started under Jimmy Carter. It was expanded under Bill Clinton, and it rolled out like Old Man River under George W. Bush. People were actually being given money to buy houses. They were getting credit back. They were buying houses with 3% down and would get a 3% bonus once they moved into the house. The banks funded thousands of these, hundreds of thousands of several million homes that people could not afford, and all came crashing down. It was 100% government endorsed. They said that these homes had a value in and of themselves when the value was only created by giving people the money to buy them. All prices set by individuals or businesses are educated guesses about how much people will pay to consume the entire supply produced. This brings us to the idea that all sales of merchandise or services at reduced price are admissions by the vendors that the initial asking price was too high. They guessed wrong. Only the person being asked to pay for a product or service is capable of determining what the product or service is worth. And in a free society, as Milton Friedman said, every single choice is a free choice. We make the choice because we feel that we are better off as a result. If government interferes, then it destroys opportunity for free choice. The law of maximization. The final law that explains all economic activities that every person seeks to maximize his or her situation in every action to get the very most of the very least. This is also called the principle of expediency. It says that human beings are greedy, lazy, impatient, ambitious, selfish, ignorant, and vain. And they constantly strive for survival, security, comfort, leisure, love, respect, and fulfillment. That was a lot being said right there. Principle of expediency. Greedy, lazy, impatient, ambitious, selfish, ignorant, vain, constantly striving for survival, security, comfort, leisure, 10, respect, 11, 12, fulfillment. This principle goes on to say that people inevitably seek the fastest and easiest way to get the things they want right now, with little concern for secondary consequences. All economic activity is built around these principles. All economic results can be explained by reference to these laws, which state that people always strive to get the most for the least, with little or no concern for secondary or unintended consequences that expecting people not to act exponentially is simply dreaming. It's like expecting people to change their eye color or expecting them not to breathe and still be healthy. One example is welfare payouts, which was helping the less fortunate as a primary consequence. But too much welfare too long, and secondary consequences that people become dependent on the government. They have no self-respect, no ability to work, no skills. Their income flattens out. They have no hope for themselves, for their future, for their children. If everyone took advantage of these government programs and nobody worked, then society would collapse tomorrow. The only reason it doesn't is that we are hoping that a sufficient number of people will not take advantage of these programs, will not act exponentially, will not take the fastest and easiest route to get the things they want with no concern for secondary consequences. They said they hope. Hope is a real strong word. Hope. So that's my take on economics. There are many more laws, but the bottom line is, as I said at the beginning, there ain't no free lunch. If you apply that rigorously to all government policies and activities and you have to apply them to the private sector, then governing would be different, completely different and much better for all of us for the future. There ain't no free lunch. There ain't no free lunch. Finally, Brian, let's conclude by discussing the impact that a life well lived, a life led by implementing the laws outlined in this program, can have a legacy for future generations. Dan. We're going to end it with Dan. With Brian, of course. No matter how many problems there are, there's a Greek saying, remember in times. This is going to be, well, I'm just going to check out real quick. All messages are visible. Some messages. Okay. There was something I was hoping to learn to do on my screen before, hold on. Share, the share button. What's this button? Up to, let's see. I was wanting to learn how to put something on my screen when somebody said something or asked something, a question in the future. But none of these seem to do it. Maybe I don't have that access yet. I'll have to do some research. Huh. Okay, that's all right. Okay. No matter no matter how many problems there are, there's a Greek saying. Remember in time like these that there have always been times like these. That no matter how many problems we have in the world today, there is still the best time in all of human history to be alive. There are many things that are happening in our world politically and economically over which we have no control. What we do is to focus on what we can control. Oh, I'm so glad I'm reading this. What we can control. Call this confirmation. Throughout all of human history, success comes from those who become very good at what they do and then they produce a very good product or service that people choose to buy in comparison with other similar products and services and buy again and again. These people earn a very good living and they save their money. And I said capitalism is savingsism. They save their money and they invest it in resources that will continue to yield money long after the investment has been made. Eventually, over the course of your lifetime, you reach the point where you've invested money and earning more than you are. At that point, if you want, gradually begin to back out of your profession or do it differently or do it in a different place. Some people go off and become missionaries and work in foreign countries. That's not a bad idea. Your job is to take 100% responsibility for your financial life and realize it's totally under your control and that whenever you are today, you can pay off your debts, save money, build a financial fortress, invest that money carefully into income producing property, and achieve financial independence for yourself and your family. Sometimes it happens far faster than you realize you'll get started, if you'll get started right away. This has been delicious. Of course, I'm going to go back and read parts of it, and then some of the people I don't know, I'll look it up and read up on them, and then things I wanted to dive deeper in as far as meaning for a few things, I'll do that. But we have ended chapter 10. Woo! Woo! Awesome. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Brian, both of y'all, for this book. And I wish I had read it way soon. I bought that book, I want to say, about 1.5, 2 years ago. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I've had that book a while and been wanting to read it. I think it's been about 2 years. When I first went to Atlanta, I had that book. I was going to read it while I was down there and I never got a chance to do it. So I'm glad I have finally sat down to read it, and I'm glad I got to share that experience with you. I hope that it helps you in your endeavors and choices going forward. And again, if you found any benefit, make sure you hit that, smash that like button, baby, and subscribe to the channel. Mwah. Have an excellent rest of your day. I'm gonna get started on a few other things here in just momentarily, okay?